We're now in our final session today and continuing the whole theme of prevention, and we've again an interesting set of panel speakers who I'll introduce as they come to the podium. In the first instance, can I ask Father Peter McVerry, who'll be somebody who's well known to you, probably one of the greatest advocates of issues around social justice and actions to alleviate some issues of social justice. So Father Peter McVerry, if I can ask you, and as Father Peter's coming to the stage, a very innovative panel, Fiona Ward, who's speaking later, has given 2 minutes of her time to Father Peter McVerry, who now has 12 minutes. Good start. Thank you. Thank you, Father Peter.
Good afternoon. I've been working with drug users for the past 40 years. Since heroin first came into the inner city of Dublin in the 1980s, my whole focus has been on trying to reduce the use and the misuse of drugs. Our trust runs 5 drug and alcohol treatment centres. And I have 2 strong convictions from that experience. First is that what we're doing now isn't working. We have spent 40 years and billions of euro primarily using the criminal justice system to reduce drug use. And the outcome? A wide variety of drugs are available in every village in Ireland. My second conviction, and you'll have heard this from other speakers, we need to treat drug use and misuse as a health problem, not a justice problem. I was in court with a young man. He was charged with the possession of cannabis to the value of €2. The case was adjourned 5 times. The Garda spent 5 mornings in court. The young person was given free legal aid, all at state expense. Judge asked for a probation report. Total, utter waste of money and of time. Parents ring me up all the time to say they've discovered their son or daughter is using drugs. They're not looking for the number of the local Garda station. They want to know what treatment options are available. No parent wants their child to have a criminal record all their lives because they were caught with the possession of a small amount of drugs for their own use. Every drug user is someone's son or daughter. But on to prevention, or as I would prefer to call it, reducing drug use. I've lived for the past 40 years in both the inner city of Dublin and Ballymun, so I can't talk about preventing people in Dublin 4 or Dublin 6 from using drugs, probably cocaine. But it is drug misusers from deprived areas who fill our prisons and cause most concern to our society. Often they cannot pay for their drugs without robbing, unlike drug users in Dublin 4. The temptation to use drugs is often stronger in deprived areas, as such areas will have a higher rate of poverty, early school dropout and higher unemployment, which can lead to drug use as a way of escaping from the reality of their lives. Tackling deprivation would undoubtedly reduce drug use. But I'm not going to suggest how to do that. The only people who know how to reduce deprivation are those living in deprived areas themselves. But they may never be given the resources or the power to enable them to do so. So here I'm looking at reducing drug use in a more limited way. Most drug misusers start using drugs early. We've worked with people who started smoking cannabis at 9 years of age. Many started using hard drugs in their mid or late teens. And they usually started because their friends offered it to them. For teenagers, the peer group is immensely influential. And nothing we can do can counteract that peer group influence. Educating young people about drugs, talking about the danger of drugs is very worthwhile, but it has very limited effect in reducing drug use. The only influence that may counteract the peer group is the family. I have the greatest admiration for parents in deprived areas who are often worn down, struggling financially, and worrying every time their child goes out, wondering what they may get up to or who they may meet. And I have particular admiration for single-parent families. I simply don't know how they cope. Many parents need support if they're to steer their children away from drugs. But family support services in deprived areas are often non-existent and those that do exist have often experienced cutbacks. When money is scarce, family support services are the first to go. Of particular concern to me is preventing people who have gone through a treatment program from relapsing. Now, if you live in a disadvantaged area where drugs are widespread, you cannot return to that area after becoming drug-free. That's where your drug-using friends live, and your drug dealer may live around the corner from your house. They need drug-free accommodation elsewhere, but the accommodation may not be available. For example, if you're homeless and you come out of treatment drug-free but still homeless, and you're looking for a bed for the night, where will you be given a bed? Probably in a hostel full of drugs. You may even be sharing a room with 2 or 3 others who are using drugs in front of you in the middle of the night. And that's a scandal, because you won't stay drug-free for longer than 48 hours. Those who believe you should just say no do not understand addiction. You also need something to do during the day. Boredom is the biggest driver back into drug use. When you're using drugs, the day is full. You get up, probably in the middle of the day. You have to go out to get your drug money. Then you take your drugs. And when they wear off, you have to start all over again. But when you're off drugs, what is there to get up for in the morning? Without something to do during the day, a job or a training program, the risk of relapse increases exponentially. Hence, reducing drug use requires coordination between all the relevant services: drug treatment services, accommodation providers, training or employment services, social welfare services, and mental health services. And if you can get government departments and statutory bodies to work together, you'll win the Nobel Peace Prize. And finally, to our prisons. A lot of drug misusers from deprived areas end up at some stage in prison. There are over 4,000 people in our prisons today, 70% of whom have an addiction. There are 10 or 12 beds in the prison service for those who want to address their addiction. There are drug counsellors in the prison service, and you wait 4 or 5 months for a first appointment with a drug counsellor. The vast majority of drug users who go to prison get little or no help with their addiction while in prison, and they get released again with an untreated addiction, and then we're surprised that they reoffend. I think the one single thing that we could do most effectively to reduce drug use is this. In the 1977 Misuse of Drugs Act, and there were no drugs of any consequence in Ireland in 1977, some far-sighted civil servant included a section which allowed judges to remand a person to a custodial drug treatment centre. The intention being that if a person successfully completes the treatment programme, then an alternative community sanction could be imposed instead of a prison sentence. 46 years later, there is still no custodial drug treatment centre. In my experience, the vast majority of people with an addiction who go to prison would prefer to address their addiction rather than spend time in a drug-filled, violent, boring prison environment. In the Scandinavian countries, a person with an addiction who is sent to prison is guaranteed a place in a treatment programme within 4 weeks of going into prison. Every drug user that I have ever worked with comes to a point in their life when they want to come off drugs, but the odds are stacked against them. They may wait many months to get into treatment. The circumstances are against them when they come out of treatment, and they can't even get treatment when they are incarcerated in the care of the state. So the 3 things I would like to emphasise: 1 is family support services to prevent young teenagers, to reduce the chances of young teenagers getting involved in drugs. Secondly, without coordination between all the relevant departments and services, we're going to go nowhere. And thirdly, so many people from deprived areas who have an addiction end up in prison, and that's an opportunity. Go to prison for 12 months, 24 months, there's an opportunity to try and help them to address their addiction, but that opportunity is wasted. We can reduce drug use, but we have to do things differently. The question is the political will to do so there? Thank you.